many people signed up and who have joined so far. It's incredible.
So we do have Connor, who has given you a passage request.
Okay.
Page 70. Thanks, Connor.
Yeah,
Okay,
after
great.
graduation. Okay, good. Well, yeah, so it's 7:08. So we are 70 strong now, and it's amazing to see everybody come together for the Big Texas Read. Thank you for being here. My name is Blake Kimsey. I'm one of the organizers with Writing Workshops Dallas, along with Gemini Inc. and really the person who started all this that we have to thank for being here, David Samuel Levinson, whose idea for a big statewide virtual reading club. And so here we are, which is pretty incredible. So thank you all for being here. Like I said, I'm the executive director of Writing Workshops Dallas, and I really just love reading. I love seeing all of your faces. And I want Alexandra Vandekamp from Gemini Inc. to say a little bit as well to kick us off.
I'm just the executive director of Gemini Inc. We're a writing arts center in San Antonio. We've been around for 27 years, believe it or not. And we just love helping people bring their stories to life. So we offer creative writing workshops, sometimes free, sometimes fair cost. We get people writing, and then we get people around great writers. So I love the idea of tonight's event. And I was pretty psyched when Blake and David approached me. To be honest, it was in the first couple of weeks of shelter in place, and I was a bit blue, and it was one of the first things that actually made me really happy about this time. I think it's great for like a San Antonio writing arts organization to be collaborating with a Dallas one, and I couldn't have done this alone. And it's kind of fun because David has taught for both of our organizations, and there's just a lot of great serendipity with it. So we love just having fun with books, and we think tonight's a perfect example of that, and we're just thrilled we can bring it to you via Zoom. So I'm ready to have fun and hear some great conversation around this book, which has a great title, Tell Me How This Ends Well. So thanks for joining us.
Befitting.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And cheers again, Shiner Bock, Beer of Texas. Population 2069, if you're keeping that at home. And we want to give a shout out to Interrobang Books and also the Twig Bookshop. Interrobang Books in Dallas and Twig Bookshop, the Twig Bookshop in San Antonio, who have been helping get books for everybody. And they've partnered with us on, we have a total of 7 authors so far scheduled for the Big Texas Read. We've got New York Times bestseller Kathleen Kent coming up after this. We've got the current Poet Laureate of Texas, Emmy Perez. We have Kendra Allen. We have Joe Lansdale. And we have a bunch of authors coming up that I think you're going to be real excited about. So hopefully we can stick around, all be together while we're sheltering in place. And
I just wanted to do just a quick shout out just to UTSA libraries, because they've been great on getting the word out. And I have 2 great interns that are UTSA undergraduates helping out. So that's it. Just want to shout out everyone. Okay, Blake, you want to take it from here?
Sure. I think it's only appropriate we introduce David. You know, where I'm really fortunate to get to know him through Writing Workshops Dallas, and I know that Gemini Inc. is as well, because he's a great writer, and just the passion that he pours into his students is the same kind of passion he pours into writing. And I do aspire to be like David. And so you might know the book you're holding in your hand. He's the author of the novel Tell Me How This Ends Well. So, or maybe you've got it on e-reader or it's in your hand. And also Antonia Lively Breaks the Silence. He has received fellowships from Yaddo, the Gentile Foundation, the Ledig House, and the Santa Fe Arts Institute, the CWNE Writers Conference, and he's taught for lots of amazing organizations. So we're happy to be guilty by association with David for this. So he's going to start off with a reading here from page 70. Is that what Connor suggested?
Yeah.
David?
Page 70. If you have the paperback, you can follow along if you want. It's at the bottom of the page, but first I want to just shout out my own little peeps. I have a friend here. I've known her. Start crying. Her name is Jackie Beckwith. I've known her probably for 45 years. And hi, my dad, Donna, all my friends who have shown up. I'm very much my mother's son, and I get choked up. I wish she were here. I'm dedicating this to her. The book is dedicated to her, and I will stop my blubbering and read. Thank you guys for coming. So here we go. After graduation, Jacob had rushed to the opposite coast. If California were the gold standard of coastlines, then this made the Eastern Standard what? The kosher salt standard? And straight into the heart of New York City, which indeed lived up to its reputation for never sleeping, or at least never sleeping without an Ambien or three. As he unfortunately came to learn, for though he'd fled the perpetual luster and glare of sunshiny LA, he'd also managed to bring the dreary skies of memory with him. And though Jacob understood that Clarence Lee Chalmers was not directly to blame for running him out of town, he was indirectly responsible for ruining the last few weeks of his senior year, and for what happened to Thad Schneider. He and Jacob both, though as far as he knew, Clarence still refused to come to terms with the part he played in the tragedy. Clarence, a loud and proud gay man, had convinced the shy, closeted, besotted Thad to come out to his devout Christian parents because Clarence believed it would help Thad let go of his quote-unquote gay shame. Clarence was supposed to have been there with him for moral support, but flaked, missing the promised brunch with the Schneiders, too hungover after an epic night out with Jacob at Japon. In the days after, Thad seemed changed, though not for the better. He moved sluggishly around campus, his eyes darker and stormier than usual. Jacob asked several times if anything was wrong, but Thad just moved right past him without a word. A few days later, he hanged himself, leaving a note that started, "Dear Clarence," and ended, "My love for you is eternal." Way to go, Connor, for choosing this passage, this lighthearted passage. Clarence had suggested Japon, and Jacob, speeding past it as if it were an optical illusion, a product of the sun, perhaps, or a mirage he hoped might vanish, registered the chill of that suggestion again, wondering why he hadn't spoken up and offered to meet him someplace else. Yet hadn't they spent many a splendiferous evening at Japon, surrounded by every conceivable Hollywood type, from the likes of Willie Levine, the son of the head of Paramount, to Bernadine Bixby, the queen of movie gossip, with the bifurcated tongue and every actor's, director's, and producer's friendly nemesis, as well as everyone in between? Clarence knew them all, for they all wanted to know him, this erudite, rich, blonde-headed boy, a standout among even the most beautiful of them. And Jacob, his sidekick, nowhere near as striking, yet handsome in his own right, so blisteringly funny, so goddamn genuine, with his aspirations tucked away in his pocket, and that big, fat Texan smile plastered on his face. Yes, they'd often spent their evenings there, and sometimes Thad had even joined them, but not that final evening, when Jacob and Clarence drank the night away, partying well into dawn, a rowdy, drunken, and strange evening, Jacob recalled, that only got stranger later as the two fell into bed together just as the sun came up, and then slipped the day away, spooning and fucking again and again, Jacob thinking Clarence had been returned to him, only to realize with horror later that while they'd been in bed, Thad and his parents had been waiting for Clarence. I will end there, and we will open the floor. Floor is open.
Hey, David, I'm glad you read that passage, and while you're reading, Connor said, "Not sorry, this passage is beautiful, okay?" So yeah, thank you for
Right on.
that.
Yeah, right on.
I just want to remind everybody that as we're talking and stuff, and as we're asking David questions, we got about 15 questions that came in from the audience over email through that form. And if you have any questions that come up, just put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that, and we'll ask David some prepared questions. We'll get to the Q&A that came in over the email, And then if there's anything that comes up after that, we'll just get to that as well. So we're going to start off with kind of a big question, because I know that this reading series and this novel means a lot to you, David. So pretty basic question, but I think it's got a lot here. Just quite simply, how long did it take you to write this novel? And I'd like to hear you talk about living in Atlanta and how you gave yourself an ultimatum to finish this manuscript.
I'm glad you asked, Blake. So back in late December of 2014, early 2015, I got up one morning and I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, dude, you've gotten really fat and this is not healthy. So I was very depressed. My mother wasn't doing well and I was eating a lot of ice cream and watching Netflix, which is basically what I've been doing now. So times haven't really changed. But I decided that I had two ultimatums I gave myself. One was to lose 30 pounds before I left Atlanta, and the other one was to write a manuscript. And so I started probably at mid-February. I was teaching a class at Emory, and I remember coming home and sitting down to write maybe around 5. And I didn't stop until probably 2 in the morning, and I knew I had something, and I just kept going. And I wrote it in 3 months, and I dropped 30 pounds because I didn't see anyone. And when I needed to take a break, I rode my bike or I took a walk. I stopped eating ice cream, which I miss to this day. And I wrote about 2,500 words a day, which is a lot. That's a lot, isn't it? It seems like a lot. It felt like a lot.
Was that different from your first novel? I'm just curious, David. Like, I'm just popping in a question here because I just thought of it.
No, that's a good question. Radically different. The first novel took 4 years and was much shorter. And this one took 3 months and was much longer. I just knew the first sentence came to me. I've never had this experience, so it's even weird to me. But I had the first sentence, and I just kept writing. I knew that I wanted to start with I knew I wanted to set it in LA because I needed to choose a city that had a large Jewish population, but also a climate that would be conducive to a bunch of fleeing Israelis, and they love Southern California because it's very much like Israel apparently. So LA was the only choice. There was no other city, and I wanted it to be a big sort of condemnation of driving. Alexandra, I remember one of your questions I think was about how did you end up keeping us interested, if you were interested, that is. How did you keep us interested for 30 pages while Jacob and Dietrich are driving to the San Fernando Valley? And I was reading the book again, and I was like, I mean, normally you're told you have to keep things moving. It's always about movement. So cars are a great way to keep things moving, but cars are very boring. But we all drive. We all are stuck in traffic. So I thought that was very relatable. And here are these two guys who haven't driven in a long time, and one doesn't even know how to drive. So I thought, what would happen if you put this combination of people in a car in LA, which is the worst place to drive on the planet, and you set them going? And the book is really, it's an odyssey. The whole book is an odyssey. It starts with these two people, these outsiders, like Odysseus, I mean, in my imagination anyway. And it just keeps going. And so I knew I wanted to start with Jacob because he's the entry point, and also LAX is the entry point into America. So, and it's the same with immigrants. Any immigrant who comes to the States, they either land in New York or they land in LA. There are no other place. I mean, maybe Chicago. So, I lived in New York for a very long time. So I just thought, set it on the East Coast and, make it about this driving, this like these cars and like the beauty of LA at night in a car. I grew up in San Antonio, and San Antonio is gorgeous at night. I think most cities are really stunning at night. New York is stunning at night. LA is stunning at night. So I thought it would be great to have these images of the clover leaves, with traffic. And at one point, I even suggested that as a cover. I mean, it's clearly like not the most original cover, but I thought the clover leaf is so American. There's no other, I don't think there's any other country that has the clover leaf, to be honest. I looked. I couldn't find another country that did what we do. And I thought that would make the book more special. So, yeah.
Yeah, very memorable highway scene. You kept me on the seat of my pants. And I don't think that's a small feat, David. And a lot of backstory gets revealed, kind of airdropped into that car that they're driving. And I liked that. It was a nice surprise as a reader. The whole thing about, you find out about, like even NPR and KGU, the radio stations, you get a sense of some of the violence happening and some of the dystopian elements are introduced that way. So I thought I liked that. Yeah.
Can we take Laura Brumley's question?
Yeah, let's encourage the chat.
Yes.
Well, yeah, let's take Laura's question. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
I mean, I'm sure everyone can see it, but here you can hear it too. She says, a question for our guest of honor. I'm curious about the genesis of the faded white peacock from the cemetery. I'm only about a third of the way through the book, but I suspect it presents purity, beauty lost. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Author?
That is a fantastic question. You probably hit on my most favorite part of the whole book. The white peacock, yes, I would say definitely purity, definitely beauty lost. Toward the end of our sessions, if you stick with it, which I hope you will, you'll be able to figure it out on your own, so I'm not going to spoil it. But there's some other white symbols. I would love for everyone to be looking out for the other white symbols. They were not done on purpose. I finished the manuscript. I gave it to no one. I reread it. I put it away for a month and then I reread it, and I was very surprised that subconsciously I had written certain white things into the book that I had no idea of. And my editor was very smart, and she actually brought it up. She said this was like the most lovely through line. The white peacock is amazing. I don't know if you've ever seen or come across a white peacock, but they're the most amazing birds you've ever seen. I mean, like the existence of God is in those birds. I can't even get over how haunting they are. So I don't know if you care about this or why I chose the white peacock. It actually chose me. I know that sounds super hokey, super hokey, but I remember going to visit this friend of mine who owns a cemetery, and we were standing above in this bizarre kind of temple that he had refurbished.
But isn't this the most the most famous cemetery in Los Angeles?
Well, it was the Hollywood Memorial Cemetery.
Okay. I
had dated a guy in college who, I don't even know if he's here. Probably not. I hope not. I had dated a guy in college whose family was who was in the funeral business, and he moved to LA and bought the Hollywood Memorial Cemetery when it was in foreclosure, and he revamped it. If anyone lives in California or in Los Angeles, he owns Hollywood Forever, and they do these like incredible cemetery, like movie in the cemetery, Shakespeare in the cemetery. Like Tyler really believes in like the living inside of these spaces, and I love that idea. So I remember visiting him, and he had these white peacocks running around, and I was like, what the fuck? Like these, they're just running around the cemetery. Like they were, they're this oddly gothic, Renaissance-y kind of bird that you just normally wouldn't ever see. And I thought it was just such a haunting image. So I kind of stole it. That's what we do, dear readers.
Well, I love that question, and I love how your novel moves between these registers of comedy and drama, and I want to go to a question from Josephine, just because it seems like a good segue from what you're talking about. She said, in some way, your book reminds me of The Master and Margarita by Bulgakov and some other Russian.
Bulgakov, yeah.
Say it again for the listeners at home.
Bulgakov.
Bulgakov and some other Russian novels, which use a blend of humor and whimsy to buffer against darker themes. What's your take on Russian writers, and have they influenced your work, especially this book?
Yeah, weirdly. That's quite a question. Whoever Josephine is, are you out there, Josephine? No. I studied Russian in college. It was my favorite language of all time, and I was surprisingly really good at it, which is why I loved it. Partly why I loved it. I love the Russian culture, and I got to read some of the masters in Russian. I took a Russian class, Russian lit class, and we read a lot of books, and one of them we read in Russian, and we read The Master and Margarita, which is, if you haven't read it, you should. It's amazing. It's really, really one of the greatest novels ever to be written. And the Russians, I'm part Russian, so I just always felt this weird affinity for the Russian novelists. I don't want to say I write like Russian novels, but I definitely love these sort of sprawling family sagas. I don't know if that's particularly Russian, but when you think of Dostoevsky, for example, like he has 70,000 characters and he goes through their lineage, and I've always kind of loved that. And it just, I don't know, it speaks to my dark little Russian soul, maybe, I don't know. But so the lighter elements, the passage I read wasn't necessarily one of the lighter elements, but there are, I think, some very light moments in this book, and I tried to I tried to balance it out. I don't know if I succeeded or not, but I tried at least to keep the dark edges from they have to sort of, it's fiction, so the dark edges have to start closing in on these characters, but I tried to make it as hopeful in places as I could. So yeah, did that answer the question? I don't even know. Yeah.
Sure
okay.
did. Sure did. Do you have any thoughts on A Gentleman in Moscow? We got that question in the chat. Any thoughts on that while we're on Russians?
Jackie, is that you? Is that you, Jackie?
That's
okay.
Jackie.
It's funny, Jackie. I actually met Amor Tolls at the book festival. Were you at that book festival, Alexandra? The one? Did I meet you there? You're muted. You unmute. Unmute. I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I didn't mean to do that. Yeah, I think it was the San Antonio Book Festival like a year ago, right?
A couple years ago.
Yeah, two.
Anyway, I met him there. I didn't know about a Gentleman in Moscow, and I was just chatting with this guy. I didn't even know it was Amor Tolls, actually. And we were chatting about New York. I think he still lives there. And he was like, oh yeah. I was like, oh, so why are you here? And he was like, I wrote A Gentleman in Moscow. And I was like, oh my fucking God. Really? I mean, this book has been on the bestseller list for 5 years, 4 years. It's like the perfect novel to read during a pandemic. I mean, don't read it. Don't support him anymore. Like, enough of him already. But support other writers, like seriously, Immortals does not eat your money. It's an interesting book. It's about a Russian count who is under house arrest, right, Jackie, and lives in the Metropole Hotel for 34 years and has to navigate it. Did you read it?
I did. Yeah.
Did you like it?
I know, I loved it. It took me a while to get through, but it was so beautifully written that I'd never read anything like that before. And I'm not a scholar by any means, but I've heard that like the Russian writers just have a knack for writing really beautiful prose.
Yeah, they do. They do. And yeah, I haven't read that book. I will put it on my list. But I've heard it's good. I mean, I think it's interesting that Alexandra, you were talking about how I kept sort of like your interest for 30 pages of like this nonsensical, very, very tedious drive. I mean, Immortals does a similar thing in keeping this guy locked down. I mean, how do you create drama and atmosphere when you're locked down in a hotel and you can't leave? Like, I mean, it's a great premise, you know, truly great.
Well, thinking about that, talk about the disorientation that the characters feel when they arrive in Los Angeles.
I think the whole book is a weird disorientation. I think that most fiction, and that's an interesting point. I think most fiction creates a sense of disorientation. I think you have to keep your characters off balance. The minute your characters are on balance, the story's over. The minute they get what they want, the story's over. So when you create a sense of disharmony at the beginning, you basically have to follow it through to the end, clearly. But you never want your characters to, I mean, you want to give them a sense of equilibrium at a certain point so you can knock them off balance again. But having these two guys, one German and one a Jewish American, fly into LAX during a very big crisis in the country, I mean, it's like dropping, I don't know, what is it like? I mean, I just had this image of like dropping nitroglycerin into a pond. I mean, I don't know if that's sort of the right image, but they're the ones who set the book going. They're the ones who spark the rest of the entire book. Without those two, I could never have written this. It wouldn't be the same book. It wouldn't have been a book. Can you unmute Blake?
Yeah, no,
Blake?
that's me. Sorry.
Oh.
This is the challenges of side conversations. So I was just sorry, people. I was just muted a little bit. So yeah, that's it.
Blake,
yeah.
you're muted.
I did want to say just quickly about A Gentleman in Moscow. Read it, David, because your book reminds me of it a little bit. It's actually a shelter-in-place book. Just like you said, he's stuck at the Metropole Hotel. And it's a wonderful exercise in how your immediate surroundings can suddenly open up and all this poetry and richness can come from it. And I think you do a wonderful job with that in your book. Like that car scene is a perfect example. You know, I think at one point you actually take the time, I love writers like this, to look for like cinnamon chapstick at the bottom of the car, like the details of the car coming to life. And you do these wonderful riffs, you know, and they seem to flow really effortlessly. So that's all. I just love that part of this book. Yeah.
Thank you. Blake, unmute.
I want Alexandra to ask her question that she had about coming from things as a poet, where she said basically, Alexandra, you asked this question, but what relationship did you have with your characters while writing this novel? I mean, you talked about how the peacock, came to life, but you wrote this novel over 3 months. And so how did the characters accompany you during the writing process? And then Alexandra, if you want to add on about what you thought about it as a poet.
Yeah, I'm just a poet. So like if there's any poets out there, I mean, I love prose. I don't know how to get a character walked across a room, or I'm not very good at that. But I'm fascinated with how prose writers talk about how characters like live with them during the novel, or so I just was curious about your experience, David, with this novel, maybe even your first one as well.
These characters, I mean, I said this actually last night to one of you, and I know it's super hokey, but I'm going to say it again because Blake really loved it. These characters lived me. I didn't live them. They basically lived me. You know, you hear about writers whose characters speak to them, and I don't know if that's really true or not, but I don't know, you know, you come across certain stories and you just know the characters and you know the image of where you're heading. And I knew, I don't know, this whole book came to me like, it just came to me just like that. Bang, there it was. It was formed. I had to rewrite the ending because my editor wasn't a fan of the ending, but I was. But other than that, the book remained exactly the same. It never changed. I never rewrote it. It came out in one draft. It just never happens that way. It never, I mean, I'm working on a book now that I've been working on for 5 years and I can't get it right. I believe in something that comes out of us like this very raw, like there's a very, for me, there's a very rawness to this book that people will either like or they won't like. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it, but I felt like it was sort of a trial by fire to write this thing. It used me up and spat me out. Let me tell you, like I never wanted to write again when I was done with it. But I love these characters. I love them. I love them to death, especially Edith. If you keep going and you're not such a fan of the Jacob section, you will be a huge fan of the Edith section. Trust me. Everyone loves Edith. Edith is like, I don't know where the hell she came from, but the book changes considerably when Edith steps onto the stage. She's unlike anything I've ever written. So I was very happy to find Edith, or she found me or whatever. Did that answer your question? Do we want to look at Lynn Parsons' question?
Yeah, that's the one I was going to ask you, because, you know, your book has a plot. You wrote it in 3 months. You were living in Atlanta and writing about Los Angeles. Elaine also wanted to know how, you know, did you spend a lot of time in LA? How did you know to include these details? But then, you know, Lynn, I was kind of had the same kind of question that Lynn did, because it came out so quickly, but there is this plot, but there's this intense focus on language, which I feel is like why you're a pantser. A pantser. You write by the seat of your pants. You don't outline, and it's amazing that this plot and these characters came out like that. And so Lynn says, I particularly love your richly descriptive language and the metacognitive focus on language, like Jacob's under his breath corrections of others' misuse of language. Like Mo says, write this instance, and Jacob says it's instant, not instance. Also, Jacob's descriptions of Dieter's how do you say that?
Malaprops.
Yeah, it's
malapropisms.
Like I read right over the name. I don't say it, but now I have to say it out loud. Right. And the words you have coined, craptacular, is one of my favorites, and I love that word too. Craptacular. Do you just focus on language naturally, or was that a more conscious part of building Jacob's character?
Oh my God, what a great question. Lynn, great question. Alexandra, you will be interested or not interested to know that I actually started as a poet. And I was like, poets don't make shit. I've got to write some fiction. And that's why I switched to being a fiction writer, because I saw everyone around me making money and I was like, fuck this bullshit. So, and I didn't know if I could make any money, but I started out as a poet. And I think the best writers started out or are poets. I still love reading poetry. I think poetry is the greatest thing on the planet. And so, yeah, I think I've always really been into language. I mean, even when I was a kid, I loved learning language. When I lived in Germany, I studied German. When I lived in Italy, I studied Italian. I studied Russian. I learned some French. I mean, I don't speak any of these fluently, not anymore anyway, but I've always been into, yeah, I mean, I think if you're a writer, I don't see how you can avoid not being into language or being into words. You can be Stephen King. No offense to Stephen King, but I'm a different kind of writer. Stephen King is clearly a different kind of writer. I guess that's where the horrible moniker literary came from. I would be considered a literary writer because, God forbid, I actually love sentences and I love how the words look on a page. And I mean, I read my books out to myself when I'm done, or I have like some kind of dictation read it out to me just to hear whether or not the sentences are flowing correctly. Who the fuck does that in the year 2019? Nobody cares about the written word as much as we do. And I suspect that there are a lot of you out there who care about it too. So that's great to see. I'm really happy that, you guys are reading different kinds of books and that you're coming to books with the same kind of ardor that we writers come to them, because I think the bridge between writer and reader I think these kinds of things bridge that gap. I think there should be more of this. I think that writing shouldn't be so solitary, and I think reading should be more participatory. So I think this kind of thing bridges that gap. I mean, being a writer is not easy. It's just not easy to sit on your bed or wherever you do it and do this thing that the world in 2020 doesn't really care that much about. Fascinatingly, I mean, you'd think that because books have been around for a very long time that they would be around for a very long time. But you'd be wrong. Although I do have to say there is some hope that in 2019 more people went to libraries than they went to the movies. So
that's a great statistic, David. Yeah.
We're on an upswing, and I think that this pandemic has clearly shown us that readers are incredibly important and writers are incredibly important. I think.
Woo! Yay!
Yeah, let's all congratulate ourselves. I think it's time that we retook our country, and I think the way we retake our country is through reading and through writing and through these kinds of discussions. I think that this is the perfect moment for this, and I hope that we can keep it all going.
Well, David, you were you writing this in 2017 or did you write this in 2016? When did you write this?
I wrote it in the early months of 2015.
Okay, so 2015. So how did you decide to set it in this near future reality, and I guess you could call it an alternate universe or the universe we're living in right now of 2022? How did that, you cast us 7 years into the future. So what were you thinking there? I mean, we're 2 years in the future now, but when you were writing it, you cast yourself or your characters.
No, yeah. I don't know why I could have cast it even further into the future. I don't know why I chose 2022. There's a reason. It escapes me why. I think I wanted to cast it, the blurbs on this book or the back copy, I don't know what it says now, but it makes it sound much more dystopian than it really is. It's not really a dystopia. It's really just, and I'm not even sure that dystopias are the right word to use for any of these books, to be honest. I think they're just extensions of our own realities. I don't really believe that we're living in a dystopia. I think we're living in the natural progression of what happens when you vote in. Sorry, people, I'm going to talk about politics. Close your ears. When you vote in a despot, an idiot, a fool, etc. I'm sorry if I'm offending certain people in the room, but I understand that everyone has his own right to an opinion. And I'm just sad. It just saddens me that I wrote a despot that turned out to be exactly like the one in office right now. I mean, his policies on Israel are much better than the policies in my novel, but I just kind of, I don't know, I just, you know, you just stand outside and you just take the temperature of certain things. And I was kind of getting, I had some run-ins with anti-Semitism on online, on Facebook, like people I hadn't talked to in a really long time suddenly were like posting on anti-Semitic threads. I won't go into it. And I just thought, what's going on here? Why is it suddenly okay for people to be posting this shit? And this is even before Donald Trump took office. This was happening in 2014. So there was something going on. I wasn't sure what, because I wasn't following Trump's campaign, but I guess even Trump's, I mean, I realized that Trump has been tweeting for a very long time. I just never followed him because he was such a joke. I lived in New York for 25 years and all we ever thought about Donald Trump was he's an idiot. Like, that's it. So when he became the nominee, it was sort of shocking. And then clearly when he was elected, it was just like, what? What the fuck? What just happened? But yeah, I remember thinking the natural progression of the anti-Semitism I'm experiencing is taken to, you know, in the novel, it's taken to a much darker, much more extreme place. But that's what novels do. I mean, look at Margaret Atwood's amazing The Handmaid's Tale. I mean, that hasn't happened. That probably won't ever happen. But there are elements of our world that we can clearly see happening around us, with women's rights being taken away from women and abortion and all this stuff, whether you believe in it or not. I mean, it's just the trouncing of civil rights over and over again. But anti-Semitism, you know, is like the oldest, could say it's probably the oldest hatred there is. One of the oldest. So when it resurges, it kind of behooves us all to be very aware of it, I think. And I was hoping that my novel sort of serves as a warning. I heard someone else speaking about their book recently. Oh, it was the guy who wrote The End of October, the virus book that's out now. And he was like, I wrote this just to be a warning, you know, and here we are. I mean, forget the warning. I mean, full throttle virus mode. So I'm hoping that whether or not people start reading my novel and think like, it could happen here. I wrote it as a warning. I wrote it really as a warning to Europe, but I had no idea that it was really a warning to America. Who the fuck knew? I mean, the rise in anti-Semitism here is atrocious. And the thing is, you know, you can call it by any name you want, anti-Semitism, racism, whatever. Basically, and we all know this, it's about hate. This novel that I wrote is about hate. It's about hate in all of its forms. I've always been very curious why people are mean, people are rude, people are petty, people are this, people are that. And I've just always been curious about it. You know, why is one person nice to that person and mean to that person? So I was trying to sort of answer that in this book through the voices of these characters. I forgot what the question was.
No, that's great. I mean, I just wanted to kind of chime off of that, David, because part of what's great about this book is also the secondary characters. One, I think you do a wonderful job evoking the relationship between Diet and Jacob and the tenderness he has for him. But even like in that one opening scene in the car, so they go through so much, you know what I mean? But you have great secondary characters. And it's kind of like great films like Casablanca and others. If there's great secondary characters, I think that really makes a great book. I mean, this is a little bit of a silly question, but how do you feel about secondary characters, or just, was there any secondary characters in this book that you had a special affinity for, or that maybe chime into this issue and the themes that you were trying to get across?
Secondary characters, Clarence, Elias. You haven't met Elias.
Mm-hmm.
Do you meet Clarence? I forgot. You've met Clarence.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Duh. I just read a passage. Who else is secondary? Is Pandora? I guess Pandora is sort of secondary.
Mm-hmm.
That was another character. Who else is secondary? Do you meet Pandora? Secondary characters. Go ahead.
Is Diet's kind of a main character, right? You wouldn't consider him secondary, right? Or is there like an in-between a main character and a secondary character?
I mean, Ian Forster talks about round and flat characters.
Oh, okay.
I would say, I don't know. I don't know if I have any real, I mean, I guess Clarence would be sort of considered a flat character. He doesn't have a huge role, but Deed has a huge role.
Right, yeah, no, he has a huge role, yeah.
He's sort of the moral center of the entire book. And I love that he's German with his dark German past, but has he's basically the moral center. Yeah, secondary characters, they're kind of hard to write. They're kind of hard to like they kind of keep the plot going when, I mean, like the kids, the twins and the kids are definitely secondary characters, but I had to have them. I have to have them. Secondary characters are fun. They're little breaths of fresh air. I love Clarence. I don't know how you guys feel about Clarence, but he's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, he's definitely memorable.
He's memorable.
I was going to ask a question from someone in the audience, Blake. I think there's some nice questions, a little bit about process. Do you mind if we just pivot in that direction about the writing process? I think I like this one from Lynn. How do you handle it when you write something that you really like your ending, as you mentioned earlier, David, and your editor doesn't like it, so you have to change it? That seems like it would be really tough to let go of your own muse and have to come up with something else for the business person. So yeah, great question. You're like tension between editor and your own muse.
I wrote her a very, very long letter about why the ending should stay the way it is. And basically you all know this probably already, but when they buy a book, they basically own it. And I guess I could have said no to her. I don't know how that would have changed my relationship with her or with the entire publishing team. But I ended up, you're basically under their thumb. You kind of have to do what they say. And it was very, very hard for me to do. I had to really sit on it, and I was very, very angry, actually. She was a great editor. She was kind of amazing. She's very, very, very smart. And it definitely changed the book.
Mm-hmm.
I think the ending I had was very dark, much darker than the ending that the book ended up having. And it was good. She basically explained it. Well, whatever, we can talk about it more when you come back during the fourth session. I don't want to give anything away. I'll tell you then. How's that?
Okay, that sounds like a deal.
There was another question I saw about someone was putting a manuscript to bed Did you see that one?
Yeah, that was a great question earlier on about
Was that Vicky, I think? Was her name Vicky?
putting a manuscript to bed and then they're getting ready to, and then what do you do when you take it out? I guess
No, this is from Robin. She says,
right, Robin.
I'm about to put my first manuscript away for the month of fermentation.
Right.
Any advice for picking it back up?
I think it's good that you're putting it away for a month. Any advice for picking it back up? How much do you believe in it? If you believe in it 100%, then you really have no issue and no problem. If you do not believe in it 100%, you have lots. Okay, that's great. Lots of good. Then I don't know. Then read it again and fix your typos and send that sucker out. I don't know what the agents are doing right now. I mean, I guess they're taking clients on. I guess they're still reading and hoping that we all get through this and books get published again. Eating chips. Yes, they're eating lots of chips. They probably are. I know my agent is.
I lots of stuff that, you know, like on Twitter that agents are reading, you know, they're reading. I mean, that's
okay.
That's what they're doing right now. So that's from they're reading literary journals. They're reading the queries that come in. So I think if you believe in your book, now is as good a time to send it out as any. I mean, everybody faces the same distractions, but that's their job. I mean, we're still working every day. So I would say, yeah, send it out, definitely.
For all you know, they might have more time to read now. You never know, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You said you don't want to spoil it for the last, the ending, for the final meeting. But we got a question. Just how does the opening set up the rest of the book? And I remember you saying this is kind of like an immigrant story on a micro level. And so,
oh right.
What does that mean for the story? Since we've got this, we've got the setup here. You've got different characters. So how does it set up the rest of the book? Maybe from a craft perspective, or just a 30,000-foot viewpoint on story.
How does it set up the rest of the book? So the book is a progression. I mean, you don't know this, and I don't know how much to really tell you, but structure-wise, every main character will have his or her own section. I'm sure you have looked through the book by now, so you would know this. So I wanted to write these really long sections. For whatever reason, I don't really know why. I just wanted to write a day, like 4 or 5 days. And I was like, how would I write 4 or 5 days? And where would I set it? And during what period of time would I set it? And who would be telling the story? And I really love, I don't like first person narratives. Like I can't write them. I don't like living with them. I always feel like I'm being lectured to somehow. I mean, that's not to say that I don't like first person narratives, but I find that I don't write them very well. So I thought, write to your strengths, basically. And my strengths are writing third person narratives, closed third person narratives from different points of view. And so I thought, okay, how would I do that? I have 3 siblings. I need 3 points of view. I won't tell you what points of view I needed, but I was like, I need 3 points of view. There's this sibling, there's that sibling, there's that sibling. Then I need a protagonist and I need a villain. And thus the novel was born. And so the opening, I'm not sure what you exactly mean by the opening, but if you mean just the drive, sort of like I kind of think of Deet and Jacob as a top. So you drop this top from a distance and it lands and it spins. And that's the first day. As the reader, you're very disoriented as they're disoriented. You have no idea what's going on. You know that the book is set in 2022, but what the hell does that mean? what are suicide car bombers? What the hell is going on? You know, why are these two guys here? They're there to murder their, you know, I assume that you've read enough of this book now that you know that Jacob thinks they're there to plot the death of their father. So there are all these little threads. I think maybe what I think what's interesting about that question is I set up all of these things that will later get picked up in every single narrative. And I didn't plot this. This is the thing that drives that I still, like this book I'm writing right now, like I forget things where I didn't in this other book. In this other book, I would mention, so Edith is mentioned when they fly to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport and they call Edith. You get your first glimpse of the sister. You don't know who she is, but you know that there's going to be a character named Edith. And then I picked Edith up later. So like, I don't know how I did this. And I would love to talk to my younger self and be like, how the fuck did you do that? Because like now it's like, I don't know. It's like it's these manic, it's like these like these little surgical cuts that you make in the body of a manuscript that you then have to sew up later, and you can't forget them. I mean, I guess I would write them down maybe. I had a notebook that I filled up when I was writing this book, but I remember like, you know, how am I going to get the peacock through the rest of this book? What the fuck? How am I going to do that? I love setting gauntlets down for myself. And this was a big gauntlet. Like, where does the peacock go? What the fuck happens to the peacock? But the end of Jacob's section is definitely one of my most favorite in the entire novel. The image of him at the window and the peacock. I mean, I don't know. I love that image. It's just one of my favorite images.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Alexandra.
No, I was just gonna say, we did get a question. It was an emailed question earlier about why you decided to forego chapters. So is that why this whole idea, David, about doing things like character to character? So I just thought I'd ask that.
No, that's a great question. People, you know, this novel was kind of a response or a reaction to what I'd been hearing from my agent, I think, in a weird way, although I didn't have an agent, so never mind. It must have been a reaction to something else. Maybe my students who I don't remember what we were reading, but I mean, a novel or a story has like certain beats, like certain breaths, you know? And I wanted to take away all of those breaths from the reader. I wanted the reader to feel like there was a clock ticking down. And so there are no breaks in any sections. They keep running. It's 108 pages, and that's what you get. And then Edith's section is 100 and whatever pages, and that's what you get. And then Mo's section there are no breaks. They're almost like little novellas. And that's sort of what I wanted. And for whatever reason, they kind of work. It just kind of worked out that way. They all take place over, one day. Mm-hmm. So the next character picks up the next day. So it all kind of flows together in this like flow charty kind of way. But I loved not being beholden to like the chapter break, chapter break.
Like a poet, it's great. I love you for that. Like breaths and everything. I think it works because I was going to say that the first section, it's amazing how much it flows. You know what I mean? Thanks. So it's almost like each chapters or sections like a Mrs. Dalloway, right? Where it's like one day, and you know what I mean? Yeah. I kind of like that idea.
Virginia Woolf is one of my favorite writers, yeah. So maybe I was channeling her or whatever.
But that was a great question from one of from Allison, who emailed it in before our session today.
Yes, Valerie, I will be sharing my original ending with you on the last call, and you all will be able to tell me that it was crap and that my editor was right.
Hey, David, Kathleen Kent has a question. She says, how important was leaving home or escaping in the formulation of who you are as a writer today?
I mean, you hit it on the head. I had to leave home, had to. I mean, if we're talking about, I would never have been able to write this novel had I not left home when I was 18, Dad, 18, 17. When did I leave home? Charles?
When you went to college.
Yeah, but how old was I? 17? 18?
Yeah, I think about 17. When you went to UT?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started at UT, then I transferred to Columbia because I always wanted to live in New York. Then I lived in New York for over 2 decades. And that's where I was a poet. I was a poet in New York, you know. That was kind of fun, the poetry scene. But yeah, leaving home, is it Thomas Wolfe who wrote You Can Never Go Home Again? And I mean, that's an amazing book. I didn't know that it was cobbled together after he died. His editor cobbled that book together. But it's about a novelist, in case you don't know what it is. It's about a novelist who writes about his hometown, and then he goes back home and he is vilified, so he has to leave. And he goes on these journeys. He goes to Paris. I think he goes to Berlin. I don't know if he ever goes back home. I didn't finish the book. But I think it's really important for a writer, well, for anybody, not just a writer, but for anybody to leave. And whether you go home again, good for you. Or whether you don't, good for you. Yeah.
There was a question on the chat too. It said, I just started the Edith portion and was struck by the immediate change in the tone. The voice of these characters was very distinct. Can you speak somewhat on voice and characters and getting the reader in their head? Just because you said you kind of imagined it as 4 separate novellas.
I did not think of it as 4 separate novellas. I always thought of it as one work, but I loved the idea of writing these super long sections. And as far as voice goes, it's interesting that you guys think that the voice is different when I was pretty sure that it was the same tone and voice throughout. So I'm glad that I will not disabuse you of that at all. If you want to think Edith has her own voice, right on. I mean, she does clearly, but it's the same narrator. I mean, it's the same, I don't know how to explain it. It's third person. It's a closed third person, we call it. So I can get into Edith's head. I can get into Jacob's head. What I don't do well and don't do at all is sort of, if you're in Edith's section, you're always in Edith's point of view. I never switch. There's no time, at least there was one time, and I remember taking it out because it didn't work. You're always in, if you start with Jacob, you're in Jacob's point of view, and then it goes to Edith's point of view, then it goes to Mo's point of view. But you're right, they're all different. They all have their own quirkiness, and whatever makes them Jacob is Jacob, and whatever makes Edith, Edith. Yeah. Edith is great. I love Edith. I'm so happy you guys are reading Edith because she's so fucking great. Did I study Russian at UT with Paul Schmidt? I did not. I don't think that's where I met. No, I was not with Paul. I left UT after a couple of years to go to Columbia, so maybe Paul took it after I left. But I am friends with Paul. Is Paul here? No, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not.
We're just talking about the different sections. Leslie had a question. She says, I'm wondering if you were paying a sort of homage to Philip Roth's The Human Stain by embedding huge declarations in the middle of seemingly ordinary paragraphs. It's how we learned of the plot to kill Dad and the annihilation of Israel, both bombshells. So What's the scoop there?
That's an interesting question. I I I love Philip Roth. I love The Human Stain. I don't know. Maybe. Is that what he did? I don't know. I don't remember. Anyone? I don't know if that's what he did in The Human Stain.
Well, I haven't read it in a while, and I do love Philip Roth. I'm currently watching The Plot Against America on HBO as it comes out each Sunday. But that is one of the things that I like about Philip Roth, and also in your book, which is interesting because you didn't plot it out. You just kind of wrote it by the seat of your pants, and these things, the plot kind of worms its way in because of character. I mean, it's like almost like you had to start with character with this book, and then everything was kind of an outgrowth of that decision rather than starting from the plot, I guess. Is that how it came to you?
No, the plot came first.
It's interesting.
The murder plot came first. I think, I mean, it's hard to say. What is a character? Who said character is destiny? I don't remember.
I forget who said it, but it's a great line. Yeah.
Character is destiny. Yeah, maybe you're right, Blake. Maybe I started with these characters, but I always knew that I wanted to have a murder plot. So I think these characters grew out of the plot. I don't know. I don't remember. I just remember sitting down and writing that first line. And then these characters just showed up. The whole book just showed up in my head, one scene after the other. It was remarkable. It has never happened to me and probably will never happen again. God damn it.
Well, that's pretty amazing that it came out so quickly. It came out in 3 months. And, so there was really no obstacle to writing the book, right? Because it just came to you. And Angela, she asked, what types of obstacles did you have to overcome to get this book published, if any?
Oh, Angela. Where are you? I don't see you. That's a great question. And I think I know Angela. I think I know which Angela that might be. Where? Raise your hand. I can't see you. Oh, well, never mind. I'll see you some other time. Any obstacles? I remember finishing the novel at the end of May of 2015. And I left Atlanta a few days later. And I think I went back to Texas. Did I? Maybe. I guess I went back to Texas. But I remember talking on the phone with a friend of mine, and I said, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to find a really big agent, and he's going to sell it quickly. And that's exactly what happened. I found a really big agent, and he sold it in 2 days. Like, I had 2 days. He sent it out on a Friday, and it was sold on a Tuesday. And that has never happened ever to me or to anyone else I know. So it was just everything kind of aligned. I never had a problem with this book. I always knew I was going to sell it. It's the only time I've really ever known that. I don't know how I knew that, but I just did.
That's amazing. Angela is here. Angela, did that answer your question? Oh, there she is. Okay.
I mean,
is this Angela from Austin?
You're unmuted, Angela, if you wanted to say anything, but.
Dad, Angela from Austin.
Okay.
Did you hear me, Charles? Never mind.
One thing, I mean, how did you find the agent? I mean, I know that's always going to be an overwhelming process, especially if someone hasn't published a lot of novels. Was it someone you already knew, or was it truly this kind of seamless process for you with this book? Like the first time you sent out a query, they took it, or?
Oh, God, no.
Yeah.
No, I parted ways with the agent I had at the time. And I started cold emailing a bunch of different agents, and a lot of them asked for the manuscript, and most of them passed for whatever reason, probably because it was too dark. And then I had forgotten I had sent it to this one particular agent, and he reps a lot of my friends, weirdly, and none of them had ever sort of mentioned that I should send to him, which I always found kind of weird. Like, they never said like, oh, send it to my agent. So behind their backs, I sent it to their agent. And 2 months later, it took him 2 months, but he called me for a meeting, and I did a few minor adjustments, and he sent it out December 9th, and it sold December 11th. I remember being in upstate. I was at Nick Flynn's house in upstate New York. And maybe it was the good energy of Nick Flynn and Lily Taylor, but I remember it was a Tuesday. I remember, I will never forget it. And then the whole day was spent like talking to him, and he's like, let me go do my thing. And he did his thing, and he sent me an email with the amount of my advance. And I was like, sign me up. And I never looked back, and it's been all downhill from there.
I mean, what did you do with the first novel? Was that much more, because the first novel is always like, you're doing things more from scratch as a writer because you don't have connections yet and things like that.
Really? Have I not ever told you the story, or have I?
No.
This is fun. I will try and make this as brief as possible. The first novel, I had an agent. He was very nice. He believed in the book. He sent it out to probably 25 editors. None of them wanted it. I fired his ass, although he was very nice. And I went to a writing colony, Ledig House, which is in upstate New York, which is incredible. If anyone ever, you all should apply. It's amazing. And while I was there, I gave a reading of a different book I was working on, and Dan Brown's agent was there. And she was like, I want to represent you. And I was like, great. Remember, Dad? Are you still there? Charles, remember when Heidi Lang was my agent? You probably don't remember that. But so Heidi Lang was my agent for about 6 weeks. I sent her the novel I wanted her to rep, and she was like, I'll rep it, but I'm not really into it. And I was like, that's not going to work for me. So I fired Dan Brown's agent. And I was agentless for a while.
Dan Brown is?
Yeah.
Dan Brown, big Dan Brown, like the big guy. And I went to another writing colony, and I was talking to a friend, and he was like, just like stop looking for agents. They're horrible. Just stop looking for them. Like, take 6 months off. So I took 6 months off. I sent it to one agent, Emma Sweeney, and with the caveat that it had already been sent out to 25 editors, and I would understand if she didn't want to look at it or read it or represent it. And she wrote me back. I sent it out on a Friday, and she wrote me on a Monday. She was like, I couldn't put it down. I loved it. I want you to do a couple things. You need to make, the main character more likable, because God forbid characters should not be likable, whatever. And I rewrote some of it to please her. And I think a week later, she sent it out, and it sold in a week.
Wow.
It's just insane. It's the same book.
Right.
It was the same exact book with the same exact title. 25 editors were like, nah. And then she sent it out, and 3 editors wanted it.
It's like you never know what's going to happen with the book. It's a good lesson in persistence, but also taking care of yourself during the process.
That's ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
I mean, way to be your own advocate. I've talked about this, and that's really
Oh yeah, Blake, you knew the story.
Yeah, no, I love hearing the story. I think it's great. I think you got to be your own advocate, and that's a great.
You do have to be your own advocate. Don't let these motherfuckers push you around. They will push you around, and
well, just no one cares about your work as much as you do, and that's the way it should be, right? So you're just got to be the champion of your own work.
Well, they do care about it, but they want to make it theirs. They want to put all their grubby little fingers all over it. delightful. They're all just delightful. I'll rep it, but not really into it. Yes, that was fun. That was great to hear from Heidi Lang. I'm still in search of an agent who cares about short stories. Like, there is not an agent on the planet, as far as I can tell, who gives a flying fuck about short stories. They're always like, no, it's like the curse. It's the curse. Don't talk to me about short stories because we can't make any money. It's all about money. Money.
I mean, that seems like a relatively new thing. I mean, I'm probably totally dating myself, but I don't remember short stories being such the thing that won't sell about 10, 15 years ago. And you'd think, I don't know, there's such a great history of short stories. So yeah, that's still, as a poet and someone who loves prose, I still kind of scratch my head over that change. But yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're published, yeah, but if you're published in the New Yorker or Harper, sure, they want your stories.
Right.
But, if you're published in Prairie Schooner or Post Road or second tier magazines, they don't give a shit because no one's read them. And if you're not read, no one's going to read you. I mean, I understand it's a business. I totally get it now. I didn't get it then, but I certainly get it now. I certainly do.
Well, I think, yeah, you go ahead, Blake.
Well, I just want to ask one last question, and then if there's any other questions that you have, bring them in the chat, and then we'll kind of wrap up for tonight. But I like this question. Let's see here. Where did it go? David, which one of your characters would you like to hang out with for a day?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Who wrote that question? Was that Sean?
It was emailed.
Rebecca.
It was Rebecca. Yeah.
It was Rebecca. Which character would I want to hang out with for a day? Probably, yeah, I would have to say Edith. Edith, you guys are going to love Edith. She's totally, the thing about this book is I'm the writer, so of course I'm going to say this, but the more you read it, the better it gets. I love Mo too. They're all so different to me. But Edith, for whatever reason, to answer your question, Jackie, this kind of feeds into Jackie's question too. Yes. If any of you want to make this into a movie, do let me know. I have a movie agent on hold. She's actually in the next room. She's waiting. All right. So, yeah, I would, I cast this book in my head all the time. I see Amy Adams as Edith. Now, who would make a good Edith? Someone sort of short with red hair. It doesn't have to be a redhead, but someone like, I love Amy Adams, but she's a little too waspy.
That's a really great question. We could kind of mull over that one. Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, if you think of actors, let's cast this the next time. So I'd love to see what you guys come up with as casting, and then I'll send it to my movie agent.
Oh, that's a great idea. Actors and actresses for the parts. That's great.
Yes.
Rooney Mara, good guess. I like that. Yeah. That's actually not bad. That's not a bad idea.
That's a good idea. That's a great idea.
So is there any final questions, Blake, that we have to ask, or just for tonight? I had one quick one, and then because you said the murder plot kind of came to you first with this book, and this can just be a quick one. Are there any other great books with murder plots that you love and you kind of thought of as inspiration for this, or no?
No.
Okay, that's interesting.
I thought this was, there clearly are books with murder plots in them, but I never read. I really wanted to write something very as original as I could be, and this was basically it.
Okay.
I wanted to buck form. I wanted to set it in the future, and I wanted to write about anti-Semitism in a way that was scary and funny at once. We Jews have a very sarcastic sense of humor, so we've had to, dealing with all the crappy bullshit that we've had to put up with. So we've developed a defense, I guess, is what it is. But yeah, no, I can't think of any. Can you guys think of any books with murder? I mean, I'm sure there have to be. I mean, I just can't think of any.
Of course, great mystery series and
Oh yeah, of course.
but I'm thinking of, you know, I can't answer my own question, David. I think I'll have to think about that.
I'm reading
Yeah, what are you reading now?
Marathon Man
Oh,
by William Goldman. I'm reading Ape Land, which was recommended to me. I can't remember the guy's name, but it's kind of amazing. What else am I reading? Oh, I'm reading City on Fire by Garth Risk Hallberg.
I think your dad was giving you a suggestion, David. Charles, come up. Charles, what were you giving a suggestion about something?
No, I was just looking at Sean Lyon's comment.
Oh, yeah.
What did Sean say?
Emma Stone, sure, great actress for Edith.
Oh, I love Emma Stone. Get her on the phone, Sean. Are you in your new kitchen, Sean? Or where are you? Unmute, Sean. Unmute.
I'm looking for Sean.
Oh, he's down. He's like third row over, fourth down.
These are almost like rows in an auditorium, except not.
Sorry, Sean. Really, Emma Stone? I mean, I love her, but for Edith, really? Sean, have you read Edith? You can talk now.
Yeah, just got into it.
Huh.
You don't think so? She's pretty versatile.
I mean, I love her. Do you know her?
Do I know her? No, I don't know her.
We should have your film agent on this for the next one, and Sean can pitch the ideas to the film agent, and we can.
Yeah, seriously. Emma Stone. Other people are saying Emma Stone. Interesting. Who would play Jacob? Anyone?
Who's the actor in that did the Facebook movie? What's his name? Oh, he's a very well-known actor. I'm forgetting his name.
Eisenberg?
Yes.
Yeah, Jesse Eisenberg.
Just one possibility, not the only. Yeah.
Ishida from Interrobang says Isla Fisher for Edith, which and you can get all the books. I know Ishida's I've been putting links in the chat about.
I love that she's been doing that. Yeah.
Directly from Interrobang and
Yes.
Phil Hughes is throwing out Native Son has a murder plot.
Oh.
L'Étranger has a murder plot. Are you sure? I'm not sure about that. What is that? What you're reading?
Oh no, Crime and Punishment, definitely, sure. Yeah.
I didn't know The Stranger had a murder plot. Oh yeah, of course it does.
Right.
And The Trial, maybe by Kafka. Does that have? There are tons of books with murder plots. Why am I blanking on this? This is ridiculous. What's wrong with me? Oh, The Secret History, which is one of my favorite books ever.
Oh, okay.
Has anyone read The Secret History? That book rocks the house. I met Donna Tartt at a party once.
Oh, really? She's another amazing author who can kind of mix poetry into prose. So
yeah, she is incredible. I met her at a Bret Easton Ellis Christmas party. Yeah.
I have that book, David. I'll read it based on your recommendation.
You have The Secret History?
In the house, but I haven't read it.
Oh my God, you are so lucky. I used to read that book once a year because I loved it so much. Talk about wanting to be with characters. I mean, my characters pale in comparison to those. I mean, we should be doing that book. So good. That book is amazing. Yes, Lisa Johnson Mitchell. It is incredible.
It is amazing.
You read The Goldfinch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, not a big fan of anything that's come after The Secret History.
Oh, okay, it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I should give it a try again, I guess, but she's great. Anyone else? White Tiger. White Tiger. What's White Tiger? Is that a murder plot? Yeah. Go like this. Yes.
Connor,
Yes.
Okay.
Connor has some two really good questions I think we'll get to next time because I think they're big questions. And it'll be good to get to those questions. He submitted them via email when we talk about the next bit of the novel, the next 100 pages. New questions will come up, I'm sure. And
Connor is my former student from Emory, and he's super bright. Hi, Connor. Oh, you're down at the bottom.
Oh, there's Connor. Let's see here. I think, did Connor choose this? Someone chose this. There's Connor. Connor.
Yes, Connor chose the page 70.
Oh, right. That's right.
Thanks, Connor.
Thank you for noticing. I'm very happy about that.
Here, let me mute David. Tell us something we don't know about David.
He's a wonderful instructor. I've learned a lot from him. And, well, I can't wait to read his next book. I know that sounds pretty generic, but I mean it. And also, I didn't expect to talk, so you caught me off guard.
That's okay, Connor. It's fine. You done good. You done good.
Thanks, baby.
And let's see here. Ishita, did you want to say anything about Interrobang? We're just so happy that you guys are supporting the Big Texas Read, and we can get all the books mentioned online. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I will say this much. David, your book's back-ordered. So blame your publisher. You can get the ebook version of it on our website, but we don't have a hand on the physical copies right now. But yeah, any books that you are currently in print, you can find on our website. If you're looking for a recommendation, you can always email us at info@interrobangbooks.com and give us kind of what you're looking for, and one of our expert booksellers will help you out with whatever it is that you want to read. But we're just so thankful. We love writing workshops. We love Blake, you, and all of the support that we've gotten. And we're really excited that we've got this new kind of method to kind of keep in touch with customers and be face-to-face with everyone.
Yay.
Yeah.
Independent
I love it.
bookstores, they're so important.
Is is Claudia here?
She's not, but she's been selling your book. This is the Twig Bookshop, another great independent bookstore in San Antonio. And I think she's ordered more books than they're coming in. Just call your bookseller. They'll get it. I mean, I think that's what's great about independent bookstores. They kind of become detectives, right? They'll get the book for you, you know, and then it is an ebook too. So, so I think we're really excited about the next one. It's May 13th, correct, Blake? Our next meeting with David?
Yep, May 13th. We'll send out a reminder. Get your questions ready as we move through this novel. And you can go ahead if you want and order Kathleen Kent's 2 books. We're going to be reading The Dime and The Burn this summer. You can go ahead and get Emmy Perez, her collection from the University of Arizona Press, With the River on Our Face.
Yeah, she's our third author.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, Texas State Poet Laureate. Yay!
Yeah, 2020 Texas State Poet Laureate. And then Kendra Allen, the winner of the Iowa Prize for Literary Nonfiction, her book, When You Learn the Alphabet. So if you want to get a jump on just having those books, if you like reading, you know, the physical copies. But yeah, we'll meet here again May 13th. It's going to be the same link that we sent out that you have. It's just going to be the same Zoom link, so keep that handy. And of course, if you have any questions for us in the meantime, send us an email. Go to Gemini Inc.'s website, which is just geminiinc.org, or writingworkshops.com.
I have one more little nugget. Alexander, maybe you have something else, but I never believed this, and I still hate to believe this, and I hate that I'm even going to have to say this because I really hate this, but I'm begging everyone who reads this book to give me some kind of review on Amazon and Goodreads. I hate that the world has come to this, that publishers actually will scan Amazon and Goodreads to see what kind of reviews you have and how many you have. So if you like the book, do me the solid, please, and go to Amazon and Goodreads. You don't even have to give it a review. I think you can just give it whatever stars you think it deserves. If you hate it, give it 1 star. If you love it, give it 5.
Mhm.
You'll see that there are plenty of people who hated it and plenty of people who loved it. So it runs the gamut. I mean, I wrote this book to be very polarizing, and it's clearly been polarizing. You'll see, like, you'll see if you do decide to give it some love or some hate.
No,
Whatever.
support authors. Hey, I think that's a great idea. I love that you asked that, David. Yeah.
I hate asking that. It's like I'm gonna have to go throw up after this is over, but I'm really thrilled to see everyone.
No, this has been great. I love the idea. What can I say? A silver lining from COVID-19 is, I don't know, Blake, we wouldn't have come up with this idea. David, you wouldn't have, if it wasn't for these highly unusual circumstances we're in. So despite the challenging moment we're all kind of navigating, it's just so great something like this could come about. And I love the intimacy of it. And we love that you joined us. It's just a thrill for all of us. We can geek out together May 13th on the next 100 pages.
Yes,
and,
please.
We'll be accompanying you. I think the last session with David's June 10th, correct? And that's when we're going to do a raffle, and we're going to give away a free workshop at Gemini Inc. We have online workshops, a free workshop with Blake at Writing Workshops Dallas, and then David's been gracious enough to even, and it's the big prize, someone gets a manuscript consultation with him. So just a lot of fun things to look forward to, and just thanks so much for joining us. This meant everything.
Bring your friends. Tell your friends. Please spread the word if you can.
And
we would love to keep this.
That raffle is to submit a question.
Right. Thanks, Blake. Yeah.
So that we can pull your name out of the hat. So when so next time around, submit a question. We've got our list going, and I never would have gotten on Zoom if it wouldn't have been for the current situation that we're in. So thank you all for being here, and to Alexandra and David, who had the idea in the first place. So we're really so thankful to you all.
Yeah, seriously, I can't believe the turnout. It's been incredible. I don't think there's ever been anything like this. I don't think that anything has gotten put together faster or has gotten the kind of press we've gotten over the last, 3 or 4 weeks. It's incredible. I mean, maybe the news cycles are slow, but I think this is, I'm kind of speechless at how many people have turned out for it. I'm so thankful that you guys have shown up and that you're here. I mean, I would love for this to be in person. Clearly, we would all love for this, but you know what? You guys wouldn't have come in person. There's no way. There's no way I would have filled a room with 200 people. There's just no way. I mean, if I were a bigger writer, maybe, but then you would have had to pay. And see, this is all for free. And that's what we love. And if you guys have any suggestions for writers that you would like to see on this, please send us emails. We really, really, really want to reach out to I don't want to say underdeserved, but writers who are not in the spotlight, writers who have never been in the spotlight. We would love to showcase their books on the Big Texas Read, and we really want to keep this going. Seriously. So send us your suggestions. We love to hear from you, and send us whatever you want. If we need to do something different, please send us suggestions for that too.
No, great. I perfectly said, yeah. Well, I guess, Blake, any last things? I think we're wrapping up, right?
Yeah, that's it. I guess as soon as I've got all the power, I'm gonna hit end the meeting. Thank you guys all for being here tonight. And we'll look forward to seeing you 2 weeks from now, and where we'll talk about different stuff and everything else. So if you have any questions or comments in the meantime, let us know. But thank you all, and happy reading. Thank you, David. Thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Blake. Thanks, David.
Give yourselves a hand. Bye. Bye, Jackie.
Good night, everybody.
See you next time. You better be there.
Until May 13th.
It seems so far away. Do you guys want to stay on? Why don't we stay on? Bye, Charles.